Welcome to the Big Report presentation. My name is Amy Navikas-Brash and I will be the moderator for this session. I'm going to start with introductions and then at the end of the presentation, we'll go through questions. So if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. So I'd like to start off with introducing our presenters. We have Susan McCleary, who works for the City of Olympia, where she develops and manages stormwater pollution prevention outreach programs under the NPDES permit for business and residential populations. She is a huge supporter of regional collaboration to improve environmental outcomes. Susan has professional and academic training in sustainable urban development, social marketing, and environmental education. Susan is co-founder and co-facilitator of the business inspection group BIG, jurisdictional coordinator for the Thurston Stream Team program, and she is a storm steering committee member. Heidi Zarghami is a water resource outreach assistant for the City of Lacey, where she helps to develop education and outreach events and campaigns to improve local water quality. She previously worked with Susan in stormwater education and outreach with the City of Olympia in project planning, social marketing, and report development. She's a graduate of the Master's of Environmental Studies program at Evergreen State College. Tally developed a particular interest in creative ways to engage people on environmental topics. Her passion is to implement positive change in the urban environment to improve social, economic, and environmental conditions. And last, we have Tally Greulich, who worked for the City of Redmond for 5 years, where she administers a source control program at local businesses. She also implements the stormwater education and outreach portion of the NPDES permit and is currently on the core team for the regional dumpster campaign. She's a native Washingtonian who likes hiking in our beautiful forests. And so with that, I will turn it over to the presenters.
Thank you, Amy, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to our session. I'm Susan McCleary. My involvement in the business inspection report includes helping develop the survey interview questions, conducting in-person interviews, and I'm co-writer of the report. During our discussion today, we will cover some background about the report, go through highlights of the report sections, and conclude with a tour of the appendices. We're going to leave time at the end of our presentation for Q&A, and we've also included a couple of polling questions that we hope you'll respond to. So we'll kick off with our first polling question, and I'll give you a quick minute to respond to the poll. So the question that we're asking is, have you seen or used the business inspection report? Answer A for yes, B for no. And the poll everywhere link is in the chat. Select skip this step or text Tally Greulich 695 to 22333. So we'll give everybody a second here. Next slide. The Business Inspection Report is a resource that provides detailed information about existing source control programs in Western Washington. The report came from the Business Inspection Group, also known as BIG, which began meeting in January 2019. The purpose of the group is to foster a culture of collaboration where jurisdictions can learn from each other to increase knowledge of source control programs, increase regional consistency in inspections, inventory development, enforcement, and outreach messaging, and increase business and public awareness of stormwater pollution prevention. As a group, one of the first things BIG looked into was the current state and future desired state of business inspections on a regional scale. And we came up with a list of outputs that the group wanted to achieve. The first was a source control business inspection report that compiled information from existing source control programs. The second was a Washington Storm Center resource page to post the report. And lastly, to develop multilingual, culturally relevant regional outreach materials for businesses. So with these goals in mind, BIG members developed a comprehensive survey to collect information about existing business inspection programs across the region. The survey was then used to conduct in-person interviews with 8 jurisdictions, including both Phase 1 and Phase 2 permittees. The survey interview responses were then aggregated into the business inspection report, which is what we're talking about today. The report is a result of a voluntary collaborative effort from BIG members and the participating jurisdictions that contributed to this work. So I have heartfelt gratitude for everyone that contributed to this body of work. This work was also used as a basis for the SAM study to develop a source control program guidance manual and trainings that will assist phase 2 permittees implementing new business inspection programs. The first sections of the guidance manual are slated to be available beginning in September. But until then, you can use this report as guidance as you begin developing your source control program to meet the new permit requirements. Next slide, please. So what's in the report? The report is broken out into 6 major sections, and the sections are organized by survey questions and responses into a table format. Each section ends with an overall summary, recommendations, and a link to the appendix that contains resource documents related to that section. Next slide, please. Section 1 covers education and outreach. In this section, there were 3 survey questions and a request for sample materials. We were interested in finding out from the jurisdictions what type of outreach was done to businesses prior to starting their inspection programs. Most of the jurisdictions said that prior outreach was not done, but some did outreach through local hazardous waste programs to small quantity generators. For all of the jurisdictions, ongoing outreach is done primarily through site visits, handing out materials, and by providing online information. About half of the jurisdictions are providing information to new businesses at the time they open. The remaining jurisdictions update their inventories annually and notify newly added businesses at that time and send information to all businesses that did not have an inspection during the permit cycle. When we asked about recognition programs and incentives for businesses, most respondents said they did not have a recognition program, but there was an interest in doing this. Free spill kits are provided to businesses by several of the jurisdictions, and EnviroStars program was mentioned by some. The jurisdictions were asked to provide examples of education, outreach, and ESL materials given to businesses. And these can be found in Appendix 6, which Heidi will be covering later in our presentation. Next slide, please. So Section 2 covers code and court enforcement. When participants were asked how they handle complaint-based response for mobile businesses, most replied that they contact the businesses directly and require them to clean up the site, and they provide them with educational materials or send an official warning letter. Some businesses notify property owners to let them know that they are ultimately responsible for cleanup and costs. And they also recommend that when hiring a contractor, to ask the appropriate questions to ensure that contractors are using proper BMPs. We also asked how many inspections require follow-up. This number ranged widely from 3 to 90%. This is likely due to differences between the jurisdictions' program designs. Follow-up actions tend to be triggered by violations found during inspections that cannot be addressed on the spot. The methods of follow-up include phone calls, additional site visits, and notification letters. And it's worth noting that follow-up visits count towards the 20% inspection requirement. All of the jurisdictions said that enforcement actions for permit compliance was rare. Enforcement protocols include a warning notification letter of water quality violations with a 30-day timeline for business compliance. If compliance isn't met, this is followed by another notification letter which requests that corrective actions be taken within a timeline ranging from 14 to 30 days. The final stage of enforcement is a penalty, though all of the jurisdictions report that very few businesses require more than one notice of violation to meet compliance. Some of the jurisdictions focus on compliance through education and focus on building relationships with the businesses, and they find this to be very effective. Although enforcement rates tend to be very low, about 1%, these cases can take a significant amount of time to bring businesses into compliance. Next slide, please. Section 3 covers data collection and management. When we asked the jurisdictions about their data management systems, almost all were integrating their systems with ArcGIS. Some of the jurisdictions had switched from Microsoft Access to other software programs, and 4 of the respondents reported transitioning to software programs that align with other stormwater programs, such as spills, IDDE, and private drainage inspections. Through this research, it became apparent that each jurisdiction has unique circumstances that require a tailored data management system. When we asked jurisdictions if they collected data electronically in the field using a mobile app, half replied yes, and 2 were planning to transition to this format. However, 2 of the respondents thought handheld devices tend to make businesses uncomfortable, cause a distraction, or could become a hazard in the field when both hands are needed. However, some of the jurisdictions reported in-field access to information helps provide better technical assistance to businesses. We also asked if they had any data management recommendations, and a few of these things stood out to me. IT knowledge and understanding of the business inspection program and program reporting requirements to ecology is essential for creating GIS applications and determining data management systems. Including parcel numbers in the database as an identifier will help with data management when business ownership changes happen. Developing business histories is important. Make sure to stay on top of entering descriptive data so that when you need to look back at a previous inspection, you can see what the issues were and how they were addressed. And lastly, when selecting data management software, understand the difference between asset-based and inspection-based platforms. That wraps it up for my section. I'm going to now hand it over to Tally, who will talk about sections 4 through 6 of the report.
Thank you, Susan. It looks like we're having a little issue with the poll everywhere. The questions got mixed up. I'm assuming it's operator error, meaning me. But we did have some responses to my question. And the question was, have you started your jurisdiction's inventory? It looks like 45% of you have and 55% of you have not. I'm going to go ahead and activate and hope that it works. The question about have you seen the big report? And if people will just let us know if they're having issues with it in the chat, that would be great. So they said, I am Tally Greulich and I am vacationing right now in Sedona, Arizona. A little bit about me. I work for the city of Redmond, where I work under the Pollution Prevention Assistance Interagency Agreement. This was formerly the local source control. Shout out to any other pollution prevention colleagues that are on the call. I interviewed a phase 1 jurisdiction for the big report. My presentation is from an interviewee perspective, and I will go over some of the answers and lessons learned I experienced during this process. All interviewees' answers were kept anonymous, so you will hear me refer to them as the jurisdiction. Next slide, please. Section 4 was broken up by inventory development and updates. What I learned in this section is that the jurisdiction used Appendix 8 to start their inventory development, but realized that some businesses on the list did not pose an environmental risk. These businesses were screened out by physically driving around or by windshield surveys. The jurisdiction that are interviewed does not include combined storm sewer systems in their inventory. Next slide, please. Inventory and development and updates continued. Appendix 8 was used as a recommendation and criteria is updated as field conditions change. Some sources that were used for inventory development were Google Maps, through complaints, or through illicit discharges. Updates to their inventory are done through Inspector Insight, and if a business is closed, it will still be added for a visit every 8 years, just to do a follow-up. Next, please. Section 5, inspection protocol. Businesses are assigned high, medium, and low risk and are inspected every 2, 4, and 6 years on a high to low scale. The jurisdiction I interviewed does not use a checklist. I know that several phase ones do. Instead, they take field notes and follow up electronically when they're back in the office. An average inspection can take up to 3 hours, which includes data entry, follow-up, and enforcement. The inspectors usually don't notify the business prior to the inspection. Next slide, please. Program management. Coordination is done verbally with other groups because timing for visiting business may be different with external organizations such as ecology. Some translation services are contracted out with consulting firms, but visits are not. Training is done internally with other inspectors. And the jurisdiction that I interviewed meets with their code enforcement department every 2 weeks to talk about corrective action items. Next slide. So I was amazed by the amount of visits that phase ones complete on a yearly basis. The jurisdictions that I interviewed complete about 750 a year. I personally do 150, so that seemed like a really large number. Pollution prevention assistance, fog, and PDI inspections are sometimes included as a source control visit, and if an illicit connection is found during an IDDE response, then it would count towards source control. Some issues that they had with logistics on combining these inspections is the timing frequency is off. So I talked earlier about the risk, how their inspection frequency are done based on risk. So let's say that maybe a PPA visit is scheduled to be every 4 years, whereas a high risk visit that they have is scheduled every 2. This can pose an issue. So sometimes they have issues with combining those visits. Next slide. All right, lessons learned. When I walked into my interview, I had some preconceived notions that it was very black and white. What I learned was that deviation is allowed if you provide appropriate justification and keep good records. So an example of this, say a construction company is on the Appendix 8 list, but it's just an office. The jurisdiction interview said that it could be removed from the list, but you need to keep track of why and the justification for this. And then one thing that they said to include were other government agencies, because school districts and other government agencies don't need a business license. Therefore, they usually don't have an assigned NICS code. So don't forget to add these to your inventory because they do pose a stormwater pollution threat. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the poll and see if it worked this time. And see how many people have used the business inspection report. So it says that we have no responses. So I guess it's not working. So I'm gonna turn my time over to Heidi. Thank you.
Thanks, Tally. What do you think? Should we try the last poll here, Tally, or should we move on?
I think we should try it because it adds a little humor to it.
Great. Okay, so we've done this one. Have you started?
We've done that one.
Right. So we'll just skip forward to my section. So thanks for bearing with us, everyone. My name's Heidi Zarghami. My participation with this report is that I helped Susan organize, summarize, and format the survey responses. I also helped translate the interviews into the report by maintaining their anonymity, and that included organizing the appendix and redacting certain information that would help keep that anonymity. The appendix is a really great resource for you all, and I think you'll see why. To access the full appendix and the digital report, you'll go to the Washington Stormwater Center. That way you'll be able to access the full thing, save it, and go to all the links within the appendix. I want to show you what that looks like. So we're going to travel there together and see if that wants to open up for me. All right, let's go to a new share here and go to the screen here, share that. Of course, it works during the technical option there, but okay, there we go. So this is the WashingtonStormwaterCenter.org. Here is the digital report. Right below it, you're going to see all the links to the appendices. I'm not going to be covering Appendix A or Appendix B because that's included within the report. Appendix A shows the entire survey template, including all the questions. And Appendix B has the full permit, the NPDES report permit for reference, which includes Appendix 8. So I'm going to just show you what Appendix C would look like, for example. When you open it, you can see all the different links that we have available here. Same thing with Appendix D, that's got 22 different links and so forth. Just to see, give you a further example here, gonna do Auto Shop 4Cs. It's an example best management practice document showing how to keep it clean with these best management practices, which is part of the Only Rain Down the Drain campaign. All right, so let's go back to our PowerPoint here. And another example of public education and outreach materials would include Where Does the Water Go? So this will include all resources that talk about stormwater and best management practices for businesses to reduce stormwater pollution. Appendix D is going to be really great too. It includes examples of code and other code enforcement materials. So code enforcement really varied among the jurisdictions. And this is going to be used as a reference when developing a method of code development for your own jurisdiction. So for example, there's a notice of violation and penalty letter here on your right. And you can see all these different ways that people decided to reach out to businesses or to word certain things with the redacted materials there. Okay, moving on, Appendix E. Inventory development, as you saw earlier, the maps were really important as they were developing their inventory of businesses. And so this one, for instance, uses iMap aerials to go back and forth. I know before Tally was talking about the street views. We have within the appendix here a source control inventory development checklist example that you can use informing your own development. Appendix F has got inspection protocol templates. You can see a postcard here on the right, which reaches out to a business and says that as of the inspection date provided above, your storm management facility meets the requirements. That's a good job. You know, there are other examples of how other respondents went about doing these inspection protocols and related materials. Some jurisdictions combine their inspections or design their surveys for very specific business types. So you can see all the different examples within there, and including a contractor list and other things that may help you as you develop your own inspection protocol. Appendix G has got a program management material, which is the Seattle Stormwater Management Program. It's a rather extensive report. So you can go through there and see all the different ways that Seattle decided to develop their stormwater management program, which should help influence your jurisdiction's development of the business inspection program. So with that, I'm going to go to our last poll. We're going to give this a shot, not to worry too much if you can't get it to work. It's just for fun. This one asks, what would not be included in a source control inspection? Again, go to the Poll Everywhere link in the chat or text it. You can select option 1, what is not included, looking inside of a storm drain. Number 2, helping a business with a charity car wash in their parking lot. Number 3, inquiring why car maintenance is conducted outside. Or number 4, ordering a coffee and looking at a business from your car. I'll give you a few moments to try that out. And then we'll hear from Tally, see if we get any results for that.
Oops. We have about 5 minutes left in the presentation.
Heidi, I'm not seeing anything.
All right, well, thanks
Hopefully-
everyone for
Thank you.
we're trying out, you know, we're trying something new. All right, well, if we don't get any respondents from that survey, then we can go over to questions.
Great. So if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. I'll go ahead and start with a question. I was wondering, when you developed your survey questions, how did you develop those questions? Did you do a literature search or some research before you developed them?
I can answer this question. So we used the big group, the Business Inspection Work Group, which consisted of inspectors, program managers, education and outreach staff, a wide variety of people working within, and also people doing local source control. So we relied on these experts to help develop the survey questions.
Awesome. Okay. I'm not seeing another question, so I'll just ask another one. What was your kind of biggest lesson learned in putting the report together?
Oh, it was a lot of work, but I think it's really amazing and awesome to see something like this happen when you get a group of people that are really interested in sharing information with others throughout the region, how they can come together, you know, through a voluntary effort to make something like this happen. So I think that was probably one of the things that I learned most from this, was just how we can get things done when we work together.
I just want to give a huge shout out to Heidi and Susan and Lori Larson Pugh for putting this report together. It was a lot of work and it was all voluntary. And so if you guys get a chance to review it, there are some great resources in there. Currently at this stage, Ken Waldo is leading our inspection, our source control program, and we referenced in the appendix the other inspection forms that the phase ones had given to the big members, and it was a way for us to like modify the inspection report for us to develop our own. So there are a lot of great resources in there, and I recommend anyone who has to develop a source control to take a look at it.
And we have another question. How will the upcoming SAM big source control work differ from this report?
I can answer that question as well. So the SAM guidance manual is going to take the business inspection report as a base, and then they're going to be looking for gaps in the business inspection report. So we invite anybody that goes through the report and identifies some information that's lacking to get a hold of me or Lori Larson, or get involved with the business inspection group and let us know what other things that you're looking for, because the consultant will be working with us to fill in those gaps. And also, they're also going to be interviewing a few more jurisdictions that we understand are implementing source control programs that we didn't know were when we did the business inspection report. So we'll have a little more wide information from jurisdictions as well.
Got 1 minute left and we have one last question. Does the report specifically address mobile businesses that generate liquid runoff?
It really doesn't address it more than what I covered in this presentation. But again, I would, if you're interested in that, I would definitely recommend joining this business inspection group, and you can do that through contacting me or Lori Larson. We cover these topics, these kind of topics all the time at our meetings, and we have an upcoming meeting on April 20th. So with that question in mind, you can definitely join our meeting and ask that question, and experts on the meeting will be happy to respond to that.
I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.